ladies and gentlemen. I am the Omni Viewer, and welcome to Genre Benders, Obscurities, and Flawed Gems, where we look at the best stuff you've never heard of. It's August of 2018, meaning that 90 years ago in 1928, Robert E. Howard's breakout hero, a monster slayer from a bygone era, made his big debut in the pulp magazines. No, not him, he came later. I'm talking about the original Witchfinder General, Solomon Kane.
Though he is now viewed as lesser to his Hyborian-age sibling, Solomon Kane was Robert E. Howard's first big success. Even though he's garbed as a Puritan, don't let his pacifist attire fool you. Kane is a warrior to the core, a swashbuckling traveler scouring the globe to hunt down and destroy evil in whatever form it takes, from pirate raiders to tyrant kings, and don't forget about the monsters and demons. Solomon Kane pretty much set the gold standard for demon hunters in fiction. Characters like Vampire Hunter D or the 2003 film version of Van Helsing shamelessly lifted the man's look while narrowing their field of focus. Heck, you could argue that the Witcher series is very close to being a Solomon Kane video game in all but name.
Naturally, I think you should check out Solomon Kane in all of his forms. The original stories by Howard are pretty much always in print and collected together. There are comics from Marvel and Dark Horse respectively, and even a role-playing game if you can believe it. But today, I'd like to talk about the criminally underrated 2009 movie directed and written by Michael J. Bassett and starring James Purefoy in the titular role.
Rather than adapt one of Howard's classic tales, the film is an origin story. Solomon Kane begins as a horrible man, someone who slaughters his foes with frightening talent and precision, all for the sake of gold and his own glory. But an encounter with the Devil's Reaper, who tries and fails to drag his damned soul to hell, puts the literal fear of God into him, and he renounces violence. Kane takes up traveling with a family bound for the New World, but they become victims of the sorcerer Malekith, whose evil forces, led by a silent masked rider, are ravaging the British countryside. The family's daughter Meredith is kidnapped, and the rest, save for the mother, are slaughtered. In this moment, Solomon Kane realizes that though he has renounced violence, violence has not renounced him. He can redeem his soul by saving Meredith, but to do so, he must once again take up the sword and musket and leave a trail of bodies in his wake.
Despite being originally released in 2009, Solomon Kane the movie didn't get a stateside release until 2012, where it quietly slipped onto DVD unnoticed by the masses. This is a shame because it's a darn good movie. Really, it's just about the best Solomon Kane movie you could hope to get.
Writer-director Michael J. Bassett is a huge fan of the source material, and it shows in every frame of this movie. Despite a few small liberties taken for narrative purposes, he took great care to translate Robert E. Howard's vision to the screen.
The term passion project has gained a bad reputation considering how many films deemed as such tend to fail. But Solomon Kane is an example of a passion project that works.
The attention to detail is so great that the film actually manages to foreshadow the climax better than most other films do, though I'll let you see how for yourselves.
One way you can really judge the effectiveness of an action or horror movie is by its quieter scenes, and the quiet scenes in Solomon Kane work wonders.
Every moment is atmospheric, whether we're gazing at the Gothic architecture or wandering through the frigid winter landscape. The mood of darkness, unease, cold, and oppression is maintained by some gorgeous cinematography and genuinely haunting music. From the very beginning, you are drawn into the world and cannot break away from it. You truly believe that this is a place where black magic can exist and spread.
Speaking of which, I have to say the film strikes a great balance portraying Kane's adversaries.
Howard's original stories didn't always pit Solomon Kane against demons and monsters. There are many stories in which his foes are mortal men, but still men so wicked that they are beyond redemption and must be destroyed. However, killing monsters is cooler, so most adaptations of the series emphasize the supernatural over the historical.
The movie does its best to portray both sides more or less equally, maybe skewing a little bit more towards the supernatural.
For most of the runtime, Kane is squaring off against Malekith's soldiers, who are controlled by him but are otherwise regular people. When the supernatural does appear, it's kept fairly grounded at first, but steadily builds in scale until a grand finale that pits Kane against a gigantic demon made of fire and metal. In this regard, the conversion of Howard's vision from page to screen is mostly maintained.
And when the action kicks in, boy does it kick in. We live in an age where action movies tend to be bogged down by CGI and music video editing, which, okay, that's not necessarily a horrible thing per se, but when done wrong, it can make movies look like confusing cartoons on speed. The Solomon Kane movie doesn't have this problem.
Kane's primary style of combat is to wield a pair of cutlasses and slice his enemies to ribbons, something which can be done practically with the right training. As such, the CGI in the action scenes is kept to a minimum, allowing the cast to actually perform the fights themselves. Bassett also knows that we, the audience, want to actually see the cool swashbuckling swordplay, so he always keeps the camera at just the right angles and levels to ensure we won't miss anything.
This is best exemplified by a scene that's not in the movie.
Included as a bonus feature on the DVD is the cave fight scene, which was sadly cut because it has no narrative reason to be there. However, it's also one of the best depictions of swordplay ever committed to film, so I'm glad it was included as an extra. Anyone who wants to be a director of action movies would do well to study this scene. But what really makes the movie is James Purefoy as the man himself.
There are some casting choices that are just perfect, as if the actor was specifically born to play that role. These are roles such as Christopher Reeve as Superman, Andy Serkis as Gollum, Bela Lugosi as Dracula, or Gene Wilder as Willy Wonka. I believe that James Purefoy as Solomon Kane deserves to be on that list.
Solomon Kane the character is very distinct in both appearance and persona. He is a man with aquiline features and a physically imposing frame who also has a deep sense of duty, faith, and sincere righteousness. Finding an actor who combines that look with the talent to sell the personality could not have been easy, but by Jove, James Purefoy is that actor.
He loves and understands the character just as much as Bassett does. In fact, he read every single one of Howard's original stories in preparation for the role. Not many actors do that sort of thing.
The menace he conveys in battle, coupled with the solemnity in which he views his mission, is spot on, and it really is a shame he never got the chance to do sequels. From beginning to end, you never see James Purefoy on the screen. You only see Solomon Kane. That's the mark of a truly stellar performance.
Fun fact, Bryan Singer stole a scene from this movie for X-Men Apocalypse. Remember the scene where Magneto's family is killed in the forest by anti-mutant radicals, then he kills all of them, and he looks up to the sky in an overhead shot and asks God, "Is this all I am to you?" Yeah, Bryan Singer lifted that wholesale from the Solomon Kane movie and hoped nobody would notice. But I did notice. For shame, sir. For shame.
So even with all the praise I'm heaping on it, is there anything about the movie that doesn't work?
Well, there are a few things.
First of all, as stated, this is an origin story, and it sticks to the formula such stories have. It's well told, make no mistake of that, but if origin stories aren't your thing, that may affect your viewing experience.
More clearly defined as an issue is the portrayal of the villains. Like so many modern superhero movies, Solomon Kane the film is lacking when it comes to its antagonists.
Kane faces some interesting foes on his journey, like a trio of especially vile bandits, or a deranged preacher hiding zombies beneath a ruined church. But the big villains are Malekith and the Masked Rider, and they leave a lot to be desired. The Masked Rider is the active bad guy, leading the villainous forces on the field and recruiting new minions along the way. He certainly has an imposing presence, but the fact that he never speaks means he's underdeveloped, and there's a twist about him which I won't spoil, but I will say it's pretty easy to figure out. As for Malekith, he's not even in the movie until the very end. Specifically, his first time on screen is at the hour and 25-minute mark, when the film is nearly over.
Unfortunately, despite a few attempts, Malekith's presence is never really felt in the film prior to his entry, which is really too bad. Had he gotten more development, he probably would have been a great villain, but as it currently stands, he feels more like he was a last-minute addition. And being that he's the main villain, he really shouldn't feel that way.
Aside from that, there are one or two special effects shots that don't quite work, owing to the film having a slightly lower budget than such films usually have. They don't last very long though, and the majority of the film still looks great. Also, Meredith is not going to win any points as a strong female character, but being a damsel in distress was par for the course in pulp stories, so maybe this was deliberate, I don't know. None of these are enough to kill the movie, mind you.
What more can I say? Solomon Kane is something you should experience in all of its forms, as I said, but the movie especially needs more love. Track down a copy and you'll be in for a swashbuckling gothic horror action adventure fantasy like no other. Not that there are many of those in the film world anyway. The point is, see this movie. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni Viewer signing off.